Some people do not feel lonely after cutting everyone off. They feel quiet, they feel lighter, they feel like they can finally breathe, and that confuses people. Because from the outside it looks cold, it looks distant, it looks like you gave up on people. But what if that is not what happened at all? What if walking away was not cruelty? What if it was exhaustion? What if, after years of over-explaining, over-giving, over-tolerating, and overextending, your mind finally reached a point where silence felt safer than connection? That is the part nobody really talks about. Not everyone who cuts people off is angry. Not everyone is bitter. Not everyone is trying to punish the world. Some people are simply tired. Tired of being the one who always understands. Tired of being the one who always forgives. Tired of being the emotional home for people who never felt like home to them. Maybe you were once the dependable one, the one who answered late-night calls, the one who listened for hours. The one who kept calming everyone down while nobody noticed how overwhelmed you were becoming. You kept showing up. You kept making space. You kept giving people access to parts of you they had not earned, until one day something in you changed. You saw their name on your phone, and instead of feeling guilt, you felt resistance. Instead of feeling urgency, you felt heaviness, and instead of picking up like you always did, you let it ring. And the strange thing was, nothing broke, the sky did not fall. The world did not collapse, it just got quieter, and that quiet felt good. For some people, that is the moment everything starts to make sense. Because the urge to withdraw does not always come from hatred. Sometimes it comes from a nervous system that has been overloaded for too long. When you have spent years around unpredictable people, draining people, emotionally demanding people, or people who only know how to take, your body starts learning a lesson before your mind can even explain it. People cost energy. Closeness costs energy, access costs energy, and after enough depletion, your system stops asking politely, it starts protecting you automatically. What looks like being distant on the outside can actually be your body trying to conserve what little emotional energy it has left. Your source transcript frames this as the nervous system shifting into protection and withdrawal after being drained too many times. But these patterns usually do not begin in adulthood. Most of them started much earlier, long before you had the language to describe what was happening. Maybe you grew up in an environment where peace never felt stable. Maybe the mood in the house could change in seconds. Maybe you learned to read facial expressions before you fully understood words. Maybe you became hyper-aware of tension, hyper-aware of tone, hyper-aware of what kind of version of yourself was safest to be around certain people. That kind of childhood does something deep to a person. It teaches you that connection is not always comfort. Sometimes connection means walking on eggshells. Sometimes it means unpredictability. Sometimes it means giving up your own peace just to keep someone else regulated. And when that happens enough times, your mind adapts. It creates a rule, a quiet inner blueprint, something like distance is safer, solitude is easier. People are unpredictable, but being alone is manageable. The original transcript ties this kind of adult cutoff pattern to earlier emotional stress, emotional cutoff, and learning that closeness can come with a cost. So now when someone gets too close, your reaction is not random. It is familiar. It is old. It is your younger self, still trying to keep you safe with the tools they built years ago. And that is why people who cut everyone off are often misunderstood. Others see a reaction, but they do not see the history behind it. They do not see the years of emotional labor. They do not see the repeated disappointments. They do not see how many times you ignored your own discomfort just to preserve a relationship that was quietly draining you. By the time you finally pull away, it usually looks sudden to other people. But to you, it was not sudden at all. It was the final chapter of a pattern you had been noticing for a very long time. That is another thing most people miss. People who cut others off are often not impulsive. They are observant. They notice shifts. They notice inconsistency. They notice who only reaches out when they need something. They notice who makes them feel small in subtle ways. They notice who gives affection with conditions attached. They notice who disappears, returns, drains, apologizes, repeats, again and again and again. So by the time you step back, it is rarely because of one moment. It is usually because your mind has collected too much evidence. The transcript emphasizes this too. The cutoff is often tied to strong pattern recognition, threat detection, and social decision-making after earlier emotional stress. That does not necessarily mean every cutoff is healthy, and this is where the psychology gets more honest. Because there is a difference between protecting your peace and building a life so defended that nobody can reach you. There is a difference between boundaries and walls. Walls say, no one gets in. Boundaries say, the wrong people do not get in. Walls are built from fear. Boundaries are built from clarity. Walls isolate, boundaries filter. And if you are not careful, pain can make those two feel identical. That is why the real question is not simply, should I cut people off? The real question is, am I protecting my peace, or am I protecting my wounds from ever being challenged? Because yes, some people absolutely need less access to you. Some people bring confusion every time they enter your life. Some people leave you feeling smaller, heavier, more anxious, more exhausted. And when you distance yourself from those people and feel relief, that relief means something. It is information. It is your system telling you that something about that connection was costing too much. Your source transcript makes this distinction directly by separating walls from boundaries and framing relief after cutting someone off as meaningful data rather than automatic dysfunction. But relief alone is not the full story, because peace can become addictive too, especially when peace comes after chaos. Especially when silence feels so much better than confusion that you begin to distrust everyone by default. That is when protection can quietly turn into permanent withdrawal. And the human nervous system was not built only for defense, it was also built for safe connection, not constant connection, not forced connection, not access for everyone. But safe, mutual, nourishing connection, the kind where you do not have to perform, the kind where you do not have to decode mixed signals. The kind where your body does not tense up before every interaction, the kind where you can exist without shrinking, managing, rescuing, or anticipating damage. That is why the goal is not to become available to everyone again. The goal is to become honest about who actually feels safe, not familiar, safe, because those are not always the same thing. A lot of people chase what feels familiar, and if your past trained you to associate closeness with unpredictability, then unhealthy relationships can feel weirdly normal. Meanwhile, calm people can feel boring, consistent people can feel suspicious, gentle people can feel unfamiliar, and that is the difficult part of healing. You do not just have to choose better people, you have to retrain yourself to recognize peace as safe, not emptiness, not disconnection, not boredom, safety. This is why solitude can feel so healing for certain people, not because they hate humanity, but because solitude may be the first place they ever stopped scanning for danger. The first place they stopped explaining themselves, the first place they stopped absorbing everyone else's emotional noise, and there is a huge difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is when you want connection and cannot access it. Solitude is when you step away from noise and finally hear yourself again. The transcript makes this same distinction clearly, describing solitude as chosen peace rather than unwanted isolation. That is why some people sit alone and feel empty. And others sit alone and feel free. Freedom is not always loud. Sometimes freedom is a silent phone, a clear weekend, a smaller circle, fewer explanations, less emotional clutter. No longer being reachable by everyone who once mistook your kindness for availability. And if that sounds harsh, it is only because society romanticizes endless access. People are taught that being good means always being open, always being responsive, always being forgiving, always being there. But if being there has been costing you your nervous system, your sleep, your clarity, your emotional stability, then stepping back is not selfish. It is overdue. There is nothing noble about being emotionally consumed by people who do not handle your heart with care. There is nothing mature about staying accessible to patterns that keep injuring you. And there is nothing wrong with becoming more selective. Selective is not cruel. Selective is not bitter. Selective is what happens when a person finally starts taking their internal world seriously. Still, there is one more truth here, and it matters. Not everyone you cut off was necessarily dangerous. Some people may have simply arrived after you were already depleted. Some people may have touched a wound they did not create. Some people may have wanted closeness, but your system only knew how to interpret closeness as pressure. That is why self-awareness matters so much, because without it you can end up protecting yourself from the wrong things, not just manipulation, but intimacy, not just chaos, but care. Not just exploitation, but love. So the deeper work is this: learn the difference between a person who drains you and a person who scares you only because they are emotionally safe in ways you are not used to. That distinction can change everything. Because the healthiest life is not built by letting everyone in, and it is not built by shutting everyone out. It is built by knowing the difference. Knowing who brings peace, knowing who brings confusion, knowing who triggers old survival patterns, knowing who honors your limits without punishing you for having them. Knowing who makes your body tighten and who helps it soften, that is real wisdom. And if you have become someone who cuts people off easily now, maybe do not rush to shame yourself for it. Maybe first ask, what did I survive that made peace feel more trustworthy than people? That question is more honest, more compassionate, and more useful than simply labeling yourself cold. Because you are probably not cold. You are probably tired of one-sided dynamics, tired of emotional inconsistency, tired of being available in ways that were never reciprocated. Tired of handing people access to your mind, your time, your nervous system, your peace, and getting chaos back in return. So no, you are not broken for becoming harder to reach. You are not heartless for needing distance. You are not wrong for protecting what took you years to rebuild. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is reduce who gets access to you. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself too. And from here, the answer is not to force yourself back into connection just to prove you are healthy. The answer is to build a life where connection is earned, mutual, calm, and real. A life where your circle may be smaller, but your nervous system is steadier. A life where your peace is not available on demand. A life where solitude is no longer a punishment, but a sanctuary. And when the right people do enter that life, they do not have to break your peace to be part of it. They protect it with you. That is how you know the difference, not by how exciting someone is. Not by how intense the bond feels, but by what happens inside your body after they leave. Do you feel drained? Or do you feel clear? Do you feel smaller? Or do you feel safe? Do you feel confused? Or do you feel calm? The right people do not make peace harder to keep. They make peace easier to trust. So if you have been cutting people off lately, maybe this is not the story of you becoming distant. Maybe it is the story of you becoming discerning. Maybe this is not isolation. Maybe this is your first real attempt at peace, and maybe the next step is not opening the door to everyone again. Maybe it is learning that the door was never supposed to stay open for everyone in the first place.